Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. There's already 85 of us. It's 1 o'clock, so we're going to start. So just to check quickly, can I just check that all our speakers are with us? I can see Kimmo, who's here in the room. Greetings to you. Lydia is there. Térésa Ribeyron. Caitlyn Southwick, I think. Is she with us? Caitlyn, is Caitlyn here? Can we see her? I think Lydia Labalette is there. Sylvain Beguin is here. We can't see Caitlyn at the moment. Just wondering whether Caitlyn, our colleague from the Icom Sustainable Development Working Group, is here.
I'm here.
Can anybody see her?
Can you see me?
Great. Okay, great, she's here. Everyone's here. So there's 107 of us. Thank you for all of our friends from Icom France, Icom from around the world, because now these sessions are international. This cycle of debates we have four participants, 4 colleagues, our Finnish friends with us, who are represented by Kimmo here, Kimmo Antila, and I'm really warm greetings to Kimmo, who we've known for many years, so we're really glad that he's with us today. This cycle of debates has also been set up with our friends from Greece, from our friends from Israel, and also the International Committee of Scientific Museums, which gives us a fairly international reach and a good spread across different partners. Today, the debate is really very important because we're going to be talking about sustainable development and museums. In this unusual circumstance that we're in now of COVID, what has that changed? Has that sped things up? We were all already very aware of the importance of developing towards sustainable development. I'm also really glad that Caitlyn Southwick, who is a member of the Icom Sustainable Development Working Group, I'm really glad that she's accepted to be with us here to talk about sustainable development questions. I won't say anything more now because it's not me that's going to be hosting the event today. I'm going to be passing over to my friend and colleague Estelle Debut. I'm going to be passing over to her, so I will see you later. Good afternoon, everybody. Really glad to see you. As Juliette just said, it's become a habit to meet every 3rd Tuesday of the month to discuss together on Zoom. And we're talking about the solidarity theme that's just been mentioned. We're going to be talking about the solidarity economy enters into the museum in terms of sustainable exhibitions, eco-design, impact measurement, and asking ourselves the question whether this is the end of productivism. How we're going to introduce environmental solidarity into the daily life of museums. What's the impact on our museums? Can sustainable development generate economic benefits beyond the ecological benefits? How should we conceive, design sustainable exhibitions with resources, what equipment, what budgets, and what skills should we be mobilizing? These are the questions that we're going to be working on this afternoon. Of course, you can raise other questions than the ones that I've mentioned, and you'll be able to raise them. We have the joy and the real opportunity to welcome in the order in which they'll be speaking with Kimmo Antila, who is the director of the Finnish Post Museum and who I am greeting for the first time. Thank you for being with us today. I'm also welcome to Lydia Labalette, who is administrator of the Castle of Dukes of Brittany Nantes History Museum. And there is Laukia Merja, who is director of exhibitions and collections at the Musée de Confluence, and her colleague, I think, Sylvain Beguin, who's the general artwork registrar of the Musée de Confluence. And greetings as well to Térésa Ribeyron, who is manager of the French Natural History Museum exhibition roaming project. And finally, Caitlyn Southwick, who's a member of the Icom Sustainable Development Working Group. So just to remind our speakers, they know it already, but as is the case with every session, you have about 7 minutes to speak to us. The idea is to present your original experiences on the ground in order to share them with members of Icom who are joining us. Audience members will be able to ask questions after the different speakers have spoken, because the goal is to share together and to share feedback together. Just to remind you again that everything that's being said is being recorded and translated, interpreted immediately into French and English. Please just click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. And all of our discussion is going to be accessible later on replay. So thank you again to Anne-Claude Maurice, who's always very effective at getting these debates straight onto our website, almost at the very end of the debate. So thank you very much. So I'd like to invite Kimmo to start. I think, Kimmo, your goal is to tell us about the objectives of your institution, which we might not all know yet, and you're also going to present some solutions that you have been able to implement within your museum and also in the reserves. Because our museums, this question affects what's visible, but also what's hidden in our museums.
Bonjour, dear Juliette, dear Estelle, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to discuss with you today about these issues. So thank you for the invitation. Do you hear me correctly? Yes. Okay, thank you. Just to checking out. So as we all know, we are living in the middle of many crises. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, and overconsumption are like different aspects of the same sustainability crisis. And talking about the structures first, I think it's a great initiative that the Finnish government has adopted this kind of a comprehensive approach to somehow to deal with these root causes of these problems. And there is this program going on to have like a carbon neutral Finland by 2035. We all know that it requires many different things. It needs new decisions on climate policy and nearly emission-free electricity and heat production by the end of 2030s, as well as reducing the carbon footprint of building, promoting circular economy, and different kind of climate-friendly food policies. In museums, of course, we are also facing these same challenges. We are at the same time redefining ourselves, trying to find out really what is the purpose of the museum in this changing world. We have a great challenge also to tackle with these problems with different audiences. We have great opportunities also to disseminate the information, the scientific knowledge, to help us within these problems. I'm personally working in a Finnish postal museum, which is located in Tampere, 175 kilometers north from Helsinki, in the second largest urban area in Finland. And we have built our activities in this kind of a new kind of a networked model. We are located in this museum center, which is hosted in this called Vapriikki, the factory, in this old industrial building in the center of Tampere. You can see the building behind me in this photograph, and we are working together with several other museums and collections and activities. The same building is also hosting Natural Science Museum, the Museum of Ice Hockey. We are annually hosting international exhibitions, and let me start by saying that this is also a sustainable model, how to deal with in the network of different kind of museums, and trying to jointly to seek for kind of a possibilities how to work more efficiently and more in a more sustainable way. During last couple of years, we have been working with our own sustainability program or paper, or kind of a working model how to work. As a part of that, we have done small, very practical, everyday deeds related to recycling, related to commuting to work, supporting bicycles, thinking about food, about what we eat, what we consume, and how we produce our exhibitions. But I think the most important thing, if I refer to these objectives of Finnish government and objectives of our museum, is our storage center. We made an initiative 2.5 years ago, and to start kind of a cooperation between two special museums national special museums in Finland, located both in Tampere, the National Museum of Labor, Verstas, and our Postal Museum. And we also found possibility to cooperate with the city of Tampere, and we got support from the Ministry of Culture and Education for this project. And this project, we were aiming to build as sustainable collection center as possible. And I know it's not an easy job, and I know that after these 2.5 years, I'm thinking about new ways in several issues that we solved during this process. I mean, it's quite obvious that the museums are quite energy consumption and effective institutions. We are consuming electricity in our exhibitions, in our premises, in our storage centers. So what to do? I mean, the first thing to start with was to think about how energy efficiency storage center we can build. So how tight, dense building it could be, what kind of modes we should use for heating the storage center, what kind of a ventilation systems we should have, and what kind of a conditions we should have in this center. I mean, there has been a lot of discussion that we actually were reading and referring to when we were making these plans, that of course we all know these kind of an very severe restrictions how to preserve the artifacts, and nevertheless you can still see some possibilities to have like a broader range of humidity or temperature in storage centers, even though that the aim should be that it should be as stable as possible. But our aim was to somehow to deal and to discuss with these issues with our conservators, with our collection managers, and trying to solve in a way or another to find out the solution which could be as sustainable as possible. Of course, talking about energy, of course it's quite obvious that we had solar power panels on the roof. We were also using geothermal power for heating. And as you know, we have a long dark winter in Finland, so it's quite obvious that the solar power it's only mainly covering our energy consumption during the summer months. That means from May until September. But during the other months we should have other energy sources available for our work. But also to search for contracts with distributors to energy that are as sustainable as possible was our goal as well, and we succeeded in this project as well. So I mean, it's nevertheless I feel a bit guilty about building a new storage center, because as you know that the carbon dioxide footprint is the heavier with the new buildings, and using concrete, which is quite obvious that at some point we should have tons of concrete also in this building, which is actually when we started to calculate our carbon dioxide footprint. I think that was one of the main issues behind the kind of a heavy footprint on the early phase of the building. But nevertheless, if you're talking about the carbon footprint in a longer period, the use of energy is essential one. So what kind of solutions you have provided to produce the energy for your premises? I mean, whether it's a museum or a storage center. And I think in that case we succeeded quite well. And I would also emphasize the meaning of a cooperation between these three museum institutions. So not just to build for yourself, but more or less like find solutions how to work together, how to work with conservators who are actually working almost next door in another storage center. So it's kind of an place with two college storage centers, and our new storage center is quite energy efficient at the moment. So that is just like one case study of how we have solved these problems. And I think it's quite obvious that we can continue discussing about these several other modes of activities, which we are already raising in the introductory speech by Juliette and Elle. And I think there are no easy answers for these questions, how to deal with these issues. Just to kind of give like another example, we were actually discussing a lot about how we should do more recyclable exhibitions, and I think we succeeded for the first time this year when we're opening up this new exhibition, which was actually produced by this kind of an rigid paper board, which is completely recyclable also. And and that was an experiment. And of course, we are not totally aware of what the footprint is, or what actually is the green handprint of these works. So we are doing like positive things to promote sustainability at the museums. Of course, we are talking about also how to compensate our footprints. So it's an issue that should be also addressed. And in Finland, we had some problems with these compensation programs and how actually the government, who has given kind of a very ambitious program about carbon neutral Finland, how they deal with these compensation programs, which are a bit complicated, but nevertheless, I think it's an excellent thing to, I mean, that you can compensate your traveling, for instance, by paying a small fee to plant trees or whatever are the actual tasks or actually procedures how to compensate, how to improve the situation with these tasks. Nevertheless, we are facing these great problems. We are also facing this kind of climate anxiety among youngsters, and we have also a great responsibility to do and to deal with these issues as well. I think the last thing I would like to say that the museums could be also somehow gave more space and possibilities also for the people who are concerned about these issues, places, forums to discuss about these issues, and also maybe some even some kind of extreme issues to be raised during these discussions. You all know what Greta Thunberg has done with her school strike and with her activities. And I have two kids in their early 20s, and I do know that Greta is their hero. She's really doing things. He's raising awareness on these issues, and I think we in our middle-aged middle-aged people who are working in kind of an established institution should also give space for these youngsters to discuss and to raise these questions inside the museums as well. Thank you, Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Kimmo.
Thank you very much, Kimmo. Thank you for sharing your experience from your country, and we can see how much these questions are leading to major efforts from your teams and your colleagues and even citizens and young people in your country. So I'm going to suggest that we hand over now to Lydia Labalette, who is the administrator of the Château des Ducs de Bretagne. When I was talking about this discussion with Lydia, we agreed that she should give a cross-cutting view of different projects in her museum. As an administrator, she is able to see a broad approach of what's going on in different areas of the museum's work. She'll talk a bit about communication, about the way that artifacts are preserved. So she'll talk about human resources, and with all of this with a CSR, corporate social responsibility hat, which takes into account sustainable development. So over to you, Lydia.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lydia Labalette. I'm the administrator of the Château des Ducs de Bretagne in Nantes. Yes, what I'm wanting to do today is to talk fairly generally, just to present a a variety of points, really. And then when there'll be time for discussion, we could come back to anything that colleagues might be interested in. First of all, for anyone who doesn't know us, we're in the center of Nantes in a chateau which was originally medieval, and then because it's changed a lot over time. And in this chateau, there is the Nantes History Museum. In order to get to the museum, you have to go into the courtyard of the chateau, and this is a free entry to the courtyard. So there's lots of people who come in there. So the first thing you see as a visitor coming in as a courtyard, this is just a small detail, but I think this is a really a CSR initiative. That's all about bringing together lots of details in an overarching strategy, and the small details are important. So one of the things you see when you come into the courtyard is a box of books, where people come and drop off books and pick up books. We decided to put this box of books and make it available to our visitors. And we work with two local stakeholders, the local library, the town library, and an association that recycles books. And we work with them. So this is just a small detail, but this is something that demonstrates immediately that we're not wanting to throw things away. We're wanting to pass things on that we don't want anymore, and make that available for other people. Another thing that in this courtyard, there is there's a place for ice cream, and these ice creams are produced with local products only, rather than using ice creams coming from all over the world. But these are local products, and once again, it's a small detail, but we're prioritizing local circuits. And then there is also in the courtyard a garden. We've called it the Anne de Bretagne garden, because we've been inspired by the trees that Anne de Bretagne loved in the 16th century. So we've put these trees in the garden. And for this project, everyone that we worked with were all local players. The craftsman that designed the reserve areas for the trees, the graphic designer who designed the plates to explain what the approach and reproduce illustrations from Anne de Bretagne's life and work, all came from Nantes. So it's not always possible to work with local players, but this is something that we're trying to do. We're lucky enough to have a number of local stakeholders who are able to help us and have the skills that we need in our area, and this seems something very important to us. Another aspect, perhaps like any of you, we try as much as possible to improve our equipment and our management. Of course, that's not always easy. We are a historically classified monument, so we can't do everything we want. Sometimes there are contradictory pressures between a local choice, but that might not be the best in terms of consumption, or we might choosing something that comes from the other end of the world, like IT and multimedia equipment, that comes from the other end of the world, but offers lower consumption. That gives us complicated choices to make, and then we can be guided or required by regulations, by the law. that's something that's very good. It's very just a little thing, but you've all had this, I think. But now we have to have LED light bulbs now in a museum like ours with 32 rooms with hundreds and hundreds of light bulbs. That's not insignificant. That is a really very different consumption level, energy consumption level. Video projectors as well also use LEDs. We change them only when they get to the end of their life cycle. This is about reducing energy consumption. And again, in the cloakrooms, in the toilets, the fact that we're putting in taps with presence detectors so that the taps aren't running when people aren't there. Devices for optimizing turning on and turning off of multimedia devices. All these are little things, and it can all seem a bit stressful when we start thinking about how we're going to do sustainable development and CSR at a broader level, and we have no idea where to start. But actually, you realize that there's already a lot of things that we're already doing, and the first thing to do, which can be quite reassuring, is to do a list of the things that we're all already doing, and to value and mention what is already being done, and encourage colleagues to bring their contributions. There's often a lot of just common sense, which helps us to work on small details, but have a real impact on our operations. Of course, the sector of the exhibition sector, and the sector that we all think about because it does involve excessive consumption of materials, equipment, exhibition infrastructure, and that's what we started working on in 2010. But I know a number of my colleagues are going to talk about this. I might not go into detail on this, but I can answer your questions later if people have specific questions. And we also have I think we have a challenge in terms of communication. In terms of paper, we're using certified renewable forests with certified inks as well. But when we remove paper and replace it with digital communication, we have the impression that it's less polluting, but that's not actually always the case. And that's something that we've really got a lot more work to do on, both in the museum and in terms of our communication tools. Digital technologies have a very big place, and we probably aren't very virtuous in that area yet. And we've got, I think, like a lot of other people, quite a lot of room for growth here. This is a weak point for us. We I think, have another weak point in terms of storage and conservation. Our colleagues are learning, are training, but we know that we have a lot of methods that use materials that are very wasteful, like bubble wrap packaging, for example. We're aware of the issues, but we're not exemplary. What we do want to do is make progress across the museum, and that's what we're looking to do across the museum. Thank you very much, Lydia, for what you've shared with us, and we will be able to come back to some of the things that you've mentioned. I'll just perhaps come back to the fact that you said that there's a lot of common sense here, but we also need tools. And I just wanted to encourage this online resource on the website of paris.fr. There is a professional book, which is the result of professional work done with the cultural and circular economy professionals who are working on this transition, and they're offering nine toolboxes in English and in French. I think there are participants from Paris here, Villeneuve de Gentil. Perhaps you may be able to say something later on during the discussion bit about this tool that's available. Now I'd like to pass on to our duo, Laukia Merja, who is the Director of Exhibitions and Collections at the Musée de Confluence in Lyon, and also Sylvain Beguin, who is the General Artwork Registrar of the Musée de Confluence. You're going to present the clean dismantling, decommissioning of the exhibition headdresses from around the world, which is the result of the donations from Antoine. And you're going to present just the context and the methodology and how the experience went with the company Fixar.
Laukia, donc la directrice de pôle collection et
Good
exposition.
afternoon. I'm going to start. My name is Merja Laukia. I'm the Director of Exhibition at the Musée du Confluence. It's a museum that opened its doors in 2014 in Lyon. It has some very diverse collections, both in art and ethnology. So thank you very much to Icom France for asking us to be part of this participatory debate on economy and ecology and solidarity. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our exhibition and give you the context, and Sylvain will tell us a bit more about the methodology and review our experience. Our museum opened in 2014, and like all of us, we're trying to reduce the ecological impact of our activities, in particular the exhibitions and the other pieces of work. As we heard earlier on, exhibitions is one of the activities in a museum that uses a lot of materials, a lot of energy, and so on. So like many museums, we were looking to reuse materials we used in our own exhibitions, and perhaps even to share materials with other institutions, museums, and other associations around the area. But we were never able to reuse all of the materials used in our temporary exhibitions. Since we have 4 temporary exhibitions a year, that was quite a large amount of waste. So we were trying to go a little bit further in terms of sustainability, responsibility, and environmental impact. So when we dismantled the headdresses from around the world exhibition in 2020, we were trying to go a bit further than what we'd done previously. It was a exhibition that was held in a room of 710 square meters. It was fairly well suited to this approach because it mainly involved just furnishing. There were things to display on different stands and furnishings, and we thought that most of what we used could be reused. So, as many museums in France, we have to work under the French Public Procurement Code. So we launched a call for tenders for the services required in order to dismantle the exhibition. So our purchasing department drew up the specifications for that job along with the legal department. We'd never done this type of contract before, so we had to kind of invent and imagine the clauses and terms of reference for this piece of dismantling work. We wanted to start with a very pragmatic approach to find out how it would work. We were not looking to work out our exact environmental impact or carbon footprint. It was more about having an initial experience So this tender process was launched, and the contract was won by a local company called FixArt. This desire that the museum had to be more environmentally friendly was a very deliberate choice, with a social aspect of trying to work with our local area. The materials used were passed on to local associations, local businesses, local schools. And following on from this fairly successful experience, we have put in place an ongoing contract for the dismantling of our exhibitions. It might not be able to apply to all the exhibitions we run during the year, but we're going to start with perhaps 1 or 2 per year and move towards a goal of using this approach in 100% of our exhibitions. It's helped us to think about how we can build into our scenography contracts to get the exhibition designers to design objects and stands that are much easier to dismantle and reuse. So Sylvain's now going to talk about the methodology and our feedback from this experience. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Sylvain Beguin. Just to go back to what Merja was saying at the end, we wanted last year, actually 2 years ago, 2019, in launching this call for tender for this dismantling, we wanted to act directly. We think about issues around eco-design. We're working on this at the same time, but we wanted to focus on an activity that would have an immediate impact, and that's why we tested the idea of putting a contract in place that would require a maximum of reuse. Let's give you a little bit more detail about the dismantling thing. There were 19 tables, 4 fairly complex scenographical structures with metal structures. There were about 30 glass display cases, bell-shaped glasses, 14 glass panes, and that was around 14.3 tons of material, 9 tons of timber, 4 tons of glass, 110 kilos of textiles, and several kilos of plastic. The contractor said, first of all, that they would work on that to catalogue it. When we look back, that was an essential stage, because at the time of dismantling, the different organisations that we contacted to say whether they would like to reuse the materials would know exactly what they would get, what quantities, in what form. So this catalogue was very important, and it was used at the time of the physical dismantling so that the process could happen fairly quickly. That was the first step to constitute this catalogue. They then contacted a network of schools, art schools, architecture schools, artistic associations, local businesses that work in the recovery and reuse of materials. There were also live performance arts companies. So 32 different organisations were able to use some or other of the elements that were taken from our exhibition. Just to tell you a bit more about the methodology, the contractor did the dismantling work. It packed and weighed every element so we could have some figures at the end. They were responsible for removing the items from the museum. So they rented trucks and vans and drove round to the different materials recovery organisations. There was a small amount of material that was not immediately collected. They stored it initially with a storage facility, and then they had a second round of giving things out. So 67% of material was given out in the initial stage. It wasn't stored, it was given straight away to different organisations. That's an important point because storage is an issue with these type of pieces of work. The second round used another 16% of materials. So altogether, we managed to reuse 92% of the material. All the glass was reused, all the metal was reused, all the textiles were reused, all the plastics were reused. And it was only the timber that was not entirely reused. So we got to 92% of materials that were able to be reused. So in order to just give you a few of the lessons we learned from this, firstly, cataloguing is really important, so that when you remove all of the items from the exhibition, you can avoid an intermediate storage step, which can be problematic. The transport issue was potentially a problem. We asked the contractor to take care of it so that the small local organisations that didn't have a van could nonetheless benefit from the materials without having to come and find a way to pick it up themselves. An additional finding from what we did, Fixar, who won the contract, has been working in this field for several years. They've initially worked in installing and dismantling exhibitions, but they'd already been thinking about this issue. They had a network that they'd already built up of associations and organisations that they would be interested in using the materials. So they were able to save time in doing the work. A final set of figures. So the dismantling with this work of giving out the materials cost 19,000 euros. Usually we would spend about 10 to 12,000 euros. So the additional cost was around 50 to 70% in order to reuse. And this was an exhibition that hadn't been designed to be dismantled in this way. And that's an important point. There was not a specific design of exhibition that had been made. And as I say, we managed to achieve 92% of reuse. For our ongoing contract, which we're putting in place this year, hopefully for the next 4 years, we're going to aim for a slightly lower reuse level, 60 to 70%, which would be equivalent to the first round of giving out the materials in the initial contract, in order to try and limit the additional costs of storage and be able to use it in as many of our exhibitions as possible. So thank you very much, Merja and Sylvain. You discussed a number of really important questions, particularly this very clever idea of using a resource catalogue, and you were talking about public procurement issues, which is a very key issue. In order to stick to time, I'm going to suggest we hand straight over to Térésa Ribeyron, who is manager of the exhibition roaming project at the National Natural History Museum in France. She was also responsible for coordination of exhibitions in the past, and so she has a lot of experience. You've led some donation and sale initiatives for some of the items used in your museum design and scenography, and you might refer to some of your most recent operations, the donation of hundreds of square meters of museum design and scenography items when you had the exhibition on furnishing and roaming.
Good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, the French National History Museum has put in place a number of approaches to improve its temporary exhibitions. So what I want to talk to you about today is not quite as impressive as we've heard from our colleagues from the Musée de Confluence, but it is interesting. So our Department of Roaming Exhibitions deals with temporary exhibitions at our museum. Our museum has been transporting its exhibitions for the last 20 years. and exhibitions over 900 square meters. We recover some of the furniture to create roaming exhibitions of 200 to 300 square meters. These exhibitions were stored in 2 storage areas of 300 square meters, which was a significant financial burden, particularly since it was in the Paris region. And then there's also a human and environmental cost of maintenance and transport of large furniture and equipment, including multimedia equipment and other infrastructure. So now we've decided to base everything on a digital approach since 2018. So we're adapting exhibitions, because in France we have the opportunity to have a number of cultural places in heritage areas, which gives very different formats. For example, one of our exhibitions was presented in a 15th century chateau, and then the year after in a modern building in Rennes. And each time there's different questions about presentation and how to bring it together. So this approach to a digital approach, a dematerialized approach, meant that we had to make decisions about what we were actually going to keep. So tools for manipulating, and the walls for the exhibitions. The idea was to give them away and make a donation of them. So donation has been possible since July 2016 for state institutions. So I'd like to mention the Agri working group, who a number of people here have been involved in that, and I'd like to salute your work, because one of the big accomplishments is an article in the law of July 2016, which allows state institutions to give scenographic material that they don't need anymore, to donate it to other smaller institutions. And that meant we could make legal donations, which wasn't so possible before. And with the rest of this law, we worked with other colleagues who were involved in launching a working group which aimed to raise questions and make us think about managing our exhibitions from design to the end of life. And we've developed a model in terms of exhibition materials. And this is something that's really important. And we've included the name of the scenographer who designed the equipment. This is something that's very important. This can be very basic furniture or much with a much clearer identity, and copyright issues are significant issues. This is one of the areas that means that we're still in discussions around this. I wanted to also talk to you today. There are a number of implementations at the Natural History Museum. There was this transition from roaming exhibitions to dematerialized exhibitions. We developed an inventory of the 300 square meters of storage in order to find out what we had in store, because these were exhibitions from the 20 last years. We wanted to have recent photos and dimensions and all the specific information in order to put them either into our database or to put them and make them available for donation or sale. At the end of 2019, about 6 to 9 months later, since this wasn't the center of our work, so we decided within our departments what we wanted to keep and what we wanted to donate. So we wanted to donate in March 2020, but unfortunately, obviously, that wasn't possible. So we've moved that back. We moved that back to June 2020, and we actually had a lot of feedback, both internally, because we made it available to our colleagues within the museum, because we have 13 sites in our museum and spread across France. We also made it available to the exhibition departments that had designed these exhibitions, roaming exhibitions. And for outside our group, we made use of a mail list for other museum professionals in France. And we used another database for a professional network of scientific, technological, industrial culture. And I'd really like to just thank all my colleagues within the exhibition and roaming team, and also the legal team, because we've had a real administrative and technical support, and it's really very important in this kind of role, in this kind of project. More than 20 beneficiaries received donations, 12 internally and 21 externally. Of course, it's the external beneficiaries who received the highest volumes. These are mainly museums, but there's also a design institution, a botanical garden, and an association. I'd just like to mention I'm giving information in square meters, because the specific, what we're talking about can't be layered on top of each other. So we can't give an estimation in terms of volume, but we can talk about the occupation of area. So we sold or donated more than 300 meters squared of walls, of glass panels and presentation panels, molds and sculptures, things that are not works of art, but are not just basic exhibition furniture. We also used an association who's specializing in recycling waste. This we had to pay for this, but it gave us enabled us to give a second life to over 100 meters squared of elements. So we had more than 415 square meters of material that was made available to other beneficiaries. So one of the things I'm really very proud of is that we only damaged 8 square meters, and this all cost us just 650 euros, and all the elements that we found a second life for made savings of 29,000 euros, which is very significant in terms of storage savings. So this project was a temporary project, since we're not going to have roaming exhibitions anymore. But this is something that we're going to see continuity. So when exhibitions are going to be adapted for roaming to going to other areas, we're going to be able to recover some of the original furniture when it happens, not after the initial dismantling. So in the Gallery of Evolution in 2019 was adapted for the Denmark Museum in September 2019. The Denmark team bought 250 meters squared of equipment. This made for savings for us in terms of furniture for them, and it decreased the volume of waste that we need to throw away. And it helped us in terms of sustainable development and the circular economy. Reuse is always better than recycling. Recycling is good, but reuse is better. So we're going to finalize our database with all the elements that we have kept. So now that we're not storing just for storing, but we have a full visibility of what we're storing, and it means that we can keep certain objects that can be reused in another exhibition, for example, mammoths or Neanderthals. We can use certain objects in common. For the Gallery of Evolution and the Museum of Mankind, they often have associations or different organizations that come and recover glass panels to reuse them or make them available to other scenographers. And this has been going on since 2015 in an annual way. And also just like to mention the initiative launched by my colleague at the Museum of Mankind, and together with the legal service, we were able to develop a public procurement contract in order to have a store of recovered materials that could be used for developing new temporary exhibitions. So this is not just handling this at the end of an exhibition, but at the point of design. And I think this is something that's very interesting, and it'll be very interesting to talk about public procurement in this context. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Térésa, for what you've said, which really adds to what's already been said today. As you say, we're talking about something that comes from the very beginning of a project to the end. You also talked about the question of copyright and the importance of collaboration with legal services. I think that's something we could come back to, even if people don't always have legal advice available. But this is an important issue. Our last speaker is Caitlyn Southwick, who's a member of the Icom Sustainable Development Working Group, and she represents that working group today. And as you know, we're always wanting to have an international dimension to our discussion debate events, because that's really in our DNA. So after what Kimmo already shared with us, Caitlyn is going to share her experience. She is a restorer, an art restorer by training, and then she's been working in conservation in museums all around the world, including at the Vatican, which is a significant institution. And so she's going to share some of her reflection that she's had for Icom and her international experience. Thank you, Caitlyn.
Bonjour, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. It's an incredible pleasure to be here and to see so many people joining us today. And thank you, Estelle, for the kind introduction. So yes, my name is Caitlyn Southwick. I am the founder and executive director of Key Culture, a nonprofit organization working towards sustainability in the cultural sector. And I'm also the secretary of the working group on sustainability for Icom. So I wanted to spend some time today discussing a little bit about, of course, my experience, but also about the working group and what Icom is doing for sustainability. I would first of all like to thank all of my colleagues and panelists who have presented today. It is incredibly inspiring to hear all of the amazing work that's already being done in this area. And I would just like to emphasize that it's incredibly important that we continue to all take action and to do our parts to contribute towards a more sustainable profession and a more sustainable future. So as I mentioned, I'm the secretary of the Icom Working Group on Sustainability. So I'd like to start off by giving a small overview of what the working group has been doing over the past few years. The Icom Working Group on Sustainability was established in 2018, and we were given a mandate to investigate the possibility of establishing an international committee on sustainability for Icom. It was an incredible pleasure, of course, to be selected to join the working group, and it's been my honor to be working with such esteemed colleagues from around the world on this incredibly important issue. And I on a personal level, I'd like to, of course, commend Icom for taking the initiative to establish the working group. I think it really shows the incredible commitment and importance of this issue of sustainability within our sector, and the recognition of the responsibility that Icom has to support sustainable development or sustainability within the museum sector. And one of the most important things that has come from the Working Group on Sustainability was the resolution that was almost unanimously passed at the Kyoto Triennial Conference in 2019. The working group put together the resolution, which is called On Sustainability and the Implementation of Agenda 2030, Transforming Our World, as a statement to demonstrate Icom's resolution to support the Agenda 2030 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this framework really establishes Icom's commitment to sustainability and also gives us a definition and a reference point for what we mean by the word sustainability. One of the most interesting aspects of working on such an international organization is that we've come to realize that sustainability means different things to different people in different parts of the world. And one of the first discussions we had as a working group was trying to define what does sustainability mean to Icom and how are we going to approach this word and this topic. And as a working group, we have decided to adapt Agenda 2030 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in order to give a broad and global context to the word sustainability. So when we refer to sustainability or sustainable development at Icom, this is what we are referring to. It's the Agenda 2030 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And the resolution was really a huge turning point, I think, for Icom, because it established not only the reference point for what sustainability meant, but the commitment to uphold this concept as an organization internationally and as individual members. And one thing that we've learned a lot about, as I mentioned, of course, sustainability may mean different things to different people, but that it is such an interconnected concept. You cannot talk about the burning of the Amazon without talking about racial injustice. You cannot talk about Black Lives Matter without talking about COVID-19. There are so many intricacies to this topic. And of course, as cultural professionals, we have a unique responsibility and role to play in not only taking individual accountability for our actions. As we've seen today, there's a lot of incredible work being done, but also for the way that we portray sustainability to our visitors and our public through our education and outreach programs. So I just wanted to highlight very quickly a couple of really exciting resources for sustainability. And then I would also like to talk about what the working group is going to be doing moving forward. And you can never talk about the SDGs in museums without talking about Henry McGee and his guide for museums and the SDGs. I will put the link in the chat in a few minutes, but it's really a wonderful place to start. If you're thinking about what the SDGs mean to us as cultural professionals and us as institutions and museums, it's Henry McGee's guide really outlines the ways that we can approach sustainability and how important and intertwined the concept of sustainability is for institutions, and also how important museums and the cultural sector is for upholding the SDGs. So I highly encourage everyone to please check those out. I will also share the link to the resolution and the Agenda 2030 document for everyone's reference. So as I mentioned, the Working Group on Sustainability in our first mandate period was tasked with looking at the role of Icom in upholding the Agenda 2030 SDGs, and also as an institution, as an international organization, what the responsibility was for Icom in terms of relating the SDGs to the members and upholding the SDGs as an organization. And as I mentioned, we put together the resolution, which was passed in 2019, and we also put together a set of recommendations that we presented to the executive board on outlining how Icom can best support the SDGs and how Icom should be engaging with this concept of sustainability. The recommendations are available online. You can find those on the website. And in our next mandate period, what we've really been looking at is establishing more lines of communication. And so I would, of course, at this point, like to invite everyone here to please get in touch with us, because it's really important for us to understand from Icom what we can do as a working group to help you, to help support your work towards sustainability, and what you believe Icom should be doing in terms of sustainability, and how we can best support your everyday work, and how we can also best support Icom as an organization internationally to engage with the SDGs and Agenda 2030. So I would love for everyone to please feel free to reach out and get in touch with us and let us know how you would like for us to be helping you towards achieving a more sustainable profession. So in addition to establishing more lines of communication, the working group this year has tasked with various themes. And we're looking at creating a action plan for 2030 and also for 2022. So it's incredibly important, obviously, that we have established a roadmap for how Icom can engage with sustainability, and also to give a timeline in terms of the framework of achieving these goals. And so we're really looking at Prague 2022 as our next road marker for where we want to go in terms of sustainability. And this being said, it's obviously incredibly important for us as Icom to be looking not only at how we can help support the membership on engaging with sustainability, but how the organization itself can, of course, practice what it preaches and start looking at how sustainability can be upheld within Icom as an organization, which of course relates to the events that we put on. So Icom Working Group on Sustainability is currently looking at currently formed a benchmarking group, and we will be starting off by looking at benchmarking events and trying to cut carbon emissions from events. We are establishing a carbon emissions benchmark baseline from the Kyoto conference in 2019, and we will be using that as the baseline to establish how many carbon emissions we would like to reduce Prague by. And the idea is that this methodology will then be applicable for all Icom events, including national committees, international committees, and regional alliances. So it's something that we believe is really important to look at, not only, of course, how we can support you, but how we are, as Icom, practicing sustainability. As I said, we're also really looking at communication. So the working group will be establishing a website, and we're looking at how we can engage more with the Icom newsletter to make sustainability a part of the conversation in all assets of communication, including, as I said, the newsletter and social media, so that we can integrate sustainability really into every aspect of Icom. As I mentioned in 2018, when the working group was established, we were tasked with investigating the option of having sustainability as an international committee. And the working group recommended against that. And the reason is because we believe that sustainability is not something that should be separated and siloed and dealt with by one group of people who are looking at this issue, but that it has to be integrated into all aspects of Icom and all aspects of every international committee, every national committee, and every regional alliance. And consequently, having it as an international committee seemed too separated from the integration that we were looking for. So Icom is still looking into what the best means of integrating sustainability into all aspects and all facets of the work is going to be looking like. And that will be part of the action plan recommendations that we put together in anticipation of Prague 2022. So as I mentioned, the Icom working group is here to help you, and we would also very much like to hear from you how we can help and what we'd like to do. And it's been absolutely an incredible honor to be working on the group with so many esteemed colleagues from around the world. And I just wanted to share a couple of different perspectives. And I think that this is one thing that as a working group has been so enriching, is that because we are such an international group and we've really delved into the various aspects and meanings of sustainability from around the world. When we talk about this word, when we with our colleagues in Brazil, it's very much related to social justice and human rights. When we talk about sustainability with our colleagues in Northern Europe, it's very much related to climate change and to the environment. We have a colleague in Mozambique. When we say the word sustainability, he said that doesn't resonate with people in my country because that's not a concept that's talked about. And so it's really important for us to not only integrate this global perspective, but also to recognize the intricacies and how intertwined all of these different concepts are. And I think that one thing that's been very important for us as a working group is not just that that we're coming up with answers, because one of the things that, of course, I'm sure everyone here is very much aware of is that sustainability can feel like a very overwhelming concept. And as I've been talking about today, all of these concepts are intertwined. And so it can feel very heavy to think, recycling our exhibition materials or installing circularity is just too big, or there's, it doesn't have enough of an impact, or what does it actually really mean? And one thing that we've really been looking into is this individual accountability. And it is so incredibly vital that every person plays a role. And no matter how small your action can feel, it's making a huge difference. Culture has a unique capacity to educate and connect with people. And I think, I'm really talking to people who believe in this, so I don't have any need to convince you of this, of course. But that capacity to create emotional connections with our visitors, with our public, is really what puts culture in such a unique position to educate and engage the public with sustainability. And it's incredibly important for us that we not only recognize this unique opportunity, but that we act on it, and that we can engage people with themes on sustainability through our art and through our exhibitions, through our programming. And of course, in order to be effective advocates for sustainability, it's absolutely vital that we practice what we preach. And so even the smallest movements, I know we've talked about a little bit about the storage facilities today, we've talked about exhibitions today. All of these aspects are absolutely vital. And if we can not only continue to look at ways that we can start lessening or mitigating our environmental impact, looking at ways that we can start decolonizing our museum and being more open and inclusive to different audiences, looking at ways that we can engage more with Indigenous populations, but also really take a vital stance in terms of amplifying that message. I went to a museum in the Netherlands, and there was an exhibition there that was absolutely beautifully done. It was a Caravaggio exhibition. And I found out after I had seen the exhibition, I talked to the designer, and she said that the exhibition was completely circular. And I thought that was absolutely amazing. And it was really exciting that, there was a circular exhibition that was put on. It was at the Rijksmuseum. But I was very surprised that that was not something that was relayed to the audience. As a visitor to the museum, I didn't get any information about the fact that it was a circular exhibition. And I think that this is one thing that is incredibly important for us to realize, is it's not just about doing the good work behind scenes, but also about educating people who come into our institutions about what we're doing and also what they can do, so that people can start connecting with concepts of individual accountability, responsibility, but also calls to action in a way that can empower not only ourselves as cultural professionals, but also each individual that we touch and that we relate to take action and to start thinking more deeply about sustainability as a concept. And so this is something that I, in my daily work, and of course as a member of the working group, is we advocate for is this idea of not only for us to start looking at our practices and the way that we're working on sustainability, but also how we're amplifying the message and how we can connect with our audiences and how we can amplify the message on a global scale. So as was mentioned, I am a conservator by training, and I know we've talked a little bit today about climate control and some of these different issues. And I was teaching a professional development course last year, and I was talking about social sustainability. We were talking about energy. We had a few different concepts that we were delving into. And there were two stories that really stuck out that I wanted to share, and hopefully can be inspiring for everyone here. The first one, we were talking about decolonization, and I was explaining to the audience a little bit about what decolonization was and what it means in terms of how we're telling our stories, and basically the ideas of perpetuating structural racism versus having safe places for dialogue and conversation, and how we relay history. And one of my students, I suppose, raised her hand and she said, this is really interesting and I never thought about it like this, but I'm a conservator. So isn't this the curator's job? Like, what am I supposed to do about it? And I think that's a question that we get a lot in terms of, as a professional that works on the nexus of sustainability and culture. The number one question is, well, what am I supposed to do? There's this, as cultural professionals, we have a responsibility to start conversations. And I think that that's the one thing that I always, whenever I'm asked, Caitlyn, what is the one thing I can do about sustainability today? The answer is always talk about it. Raising awareness and building up conversations about sustainability is the first step towards engaging with and acting on sustainability. When people think about sustainability, it can feel like as I mentioned, a very overwhelming concept, and you can feel helpless in terms of, well, I don't have the decision-making power, or I'm just a conservator, or I don't know, enough about circularity, so I don't want to engage. But if you start bringing it up in everyday conversation, if you start building that awareness, not only within yourself, but also with your colleagues, that's the first step towards moving into a more sustainable future. Because as that conservator who thought, well, it's the curator's job to deal with decolonization, not mine, if they don't bring that conversation up to the curator, then it may never be a conversation that's had. So I would just like to advocate today for that individual accountability in terms of, maybe you don't have the decision-making power at your institution to talk, to change your energy provider, or to implement, sorry, my dog, or to implement, a recycling program. But you always have the power. You always have the opportunity to ask questions and to start conversations. And that's something that everybody can do, is question, why are we doing what we're doing? As cultural professionals, as a conservator by training, my job was to preserve our culture for the future. But if there's no planet and there's no future, then what's the point of conserving our cultural heritage? So it's incredibly important for us to realize that we have this unique role to play, not only in terms of how we preserve our heritage for the future, but also in terms of how we preserve our future. So I don't want to take up too much time, because I actually would love to hear some questions from everyone. As I said, one of the things that we would love to hear from you all at the working group on sustainability is how we can help you, how you'd like to see Icom engage with sustainability. So please feel free to reach out. I will put our email address in the chat, along with the resources that I mentioned, and really looking forward to continuing to work together towards a sustainable future. And I'd like to, of course, thank again my fellow panelists who are doing such incredible work. It's really been inspiring to hear today how you all are engaging already with sustainability and doing so many incredible things. So please get in touch. We'd love to share your stories on the various platforms with Icom. We love to show what people are doing, celebrate the incredible successes that we're already having. So thank you again so much. And yeah, I'm very happy to answer any questions, of course.
Merci infiniment, Caitlyn.
Thank you very much, Caitlyn. Thank you for your passion for this subject, which is extremely communicative. So we've had lots of reactions and questions in the chat box. Thank you for talking again about the Agenda 2030 and the UN SDGs. So a number of questions have come up. There's been a lot of awareness that's been raised. I think we're going to need to start a working group on sustainability within Icom France in order to go further in what's been done internationally. But some of the questions that were asked included one from Kaya Mandari, who was asking, how can we estimate the carbon footprint of each project? Is there anyone who can answer this question in just a few words? Okay, Térésa.
Yes, I just wanted to specify that the carbon assessment is not necessarily the best tool. We asked an intern to analyze the life cycle, which is a better tool because life cycle will take into account materials from extraction until through design and use to recycling. So it's larger than a carbon assessment. And I'd like to encourage you to think about this approach. I can put you in touch with someone who worked with our intern on this area. Using a construction database to estimate the footprint of materials used. And one of the worst materials are actually carpets. Thank you for this response. Just another question. Is there an eco-responsible label or certification for museums? An eco-responsible label for museums. Does that mean there is another one? Hi, I'm Thierry Rodin from the Victor Hugo Museum. I asked this question. I've done a little search and I haven't been able to find this kind of label, because the label will give directives and a set of specific commitments. Because in our museum, we want to get involved in this, but it seems that it would be good to have a label, a certification label. Térésa, I think you had an answer. Yes, actually, this was something that one of our intern did at the time. We found an example of a label in a West American museum, but in France, we haven't. I'm not aware of one in France, but that does seem to be a tool to be developed, particularly as Caitlyn was saying, to be able to publicize it to our visitors. Perhaps I could just add something on this point. Yes, it doesn't exist, and actually, by definition, it's something that's very complicated to design, as we've understood today. Sustainable development, eco-design, the circular economy is something that's cross-cutting, so it's extremely complicated to develop a label that covers all the possibilities in this area, and then there are labels that cover buildings, etc. There are some labels that cover those kind of areas that the institutions and museums could use. But I think what would be good is that I think I'm not convinced that it would be possible to develop a label like this. As Térésa said, I think there's only 2 or 3 institutions in the world who have managed to obtain this. I don't know if Caitlyn would have specific examples. I just, if I can jump in, I found a European eco-responsible label which applied by sector, sort of for schools, for example, and could be adapted then to each activity. I wrote to this contact a few months ago and I had no answer. But I think that for museums, in terms of we've got the accessibility label and the disability label, and that helped us to work in great detail. It gave us criteria to work on. I think that would be a good source. I think for me that would be something that would be worthwhile doing. Thank you very much. Another question: can we measure the impact of digital technology in this area? We've not talked a great deal about that. We couldn't talk about everything today, but Caitlyn, would you have an idea, anything to say about the impact of digital technologies in this area?
That's a really, really good question. And I think we could have another hour-and-a-half conversation about just that. Of course, this is more relevant than ever between COVID and people, institutions digitizing their collections. And one thing, of course, that we've started realizing is that there is a digital carbon footprint. And I found it really amazing. I was looking into this concept, and someone told me that the little line at the bottom of your email that says, think before you print this email, be green or whatever, that actually has a larger carbon footprint than printing the email itself. Because, of course, emails just take up so much bandwidth and storage space. And these storage centers are just being built all over the world. And it's estimated that by 2025, data centers are going to consume 20% of the world's energy. It's just absolutely shocking how the exponential growth of this. And unfortunately, right now, we don't really understand what the carbon footprint is. And this is actually something that I am really delving into in my personal work as the director of Key Culture in terms, and also the accreditation discussion that we were having previously as well, because I think that that's a really interesting concept. But we don't have enough information right now about what the digital carbon footprint is. But I think that what we need to do is, when we're talking about digitization and when we're thinking about putting our collections online, it's not just okay, let's just throw everything online and tick a box. We need to really think more strategically in terms of how we're putting our collections online and why we're putting our collections online. And, is it actually filling that box of being more accessible, or is it just a carbon suck? So I think it's really a really hugely important topic, and it's something that we're looking at in terms of putting together some workshops and also putting together some tools and resources. So keep an eye out for those from Key Culture. But it's for right now, all I can say is that when we're thinking about digitizing, don't just digitize to digitize. Make sure that there's a strategy behind it and there's a reason why you're doing it. So I think that, I'm happy to discuss this in further detail with anyone. Please feel free to reach out. But I right now, all we can do is just be really mindful of why we're digitizing. And, and if there is a reason to digitize collections, maybe there's some other places that we can also think about mitigating our digital footprint. So things like deleting emails and not including so many signatures on them, and reducing our carbon footprint in other places. So just being mindful, I think, is what we can do right
now. Merci, Caitlyn. Alors, ça faisait le lien.
Thank you, Caitlyn. That's made an obvious link to our previous debate when we talked about digital strategy in particular. I mentioned this in the conversation in the chat. There's a lot of resources that have been shared there. We've seen the Paris guide, the Paris.fr guide has been made available there in the chat. And then also information on resource systems that might already exist. There are a number of solutions that are already available. I also wanted to mention that there are a whole range of initiatives with museums of society, for example, but also in the chat we've seen that there's a whole range of resources put in place by the the museum organization, RMGNP, and the Museum of Lille. Would anyone, the person who mentioned this, would they be able to just add something in here? Or have they had to go already from the RMNGP and from the Lille Fine Art Museum? Hi, can you hear me? No, I just wanted to say that we worked with the Lille Fine Art Museum on 2 exhibitions. I think we've also got representatives from the Fine Art Museum here, Melanie, who's working on the development, sustainable development strategy in the Lille Fine Arts Museum. We're working on 2 exhibitions to try and go further in this area. We're trying to develop eco-design of the exhibition and also on other areas, communication. I'm trying to have more greener communication. And there's another person, Valérie Bonner, who's joined our organization at the Grand Palais for an overall sustainable development approach for all our activities, publishing, marketing, human resources. We're developing a bigger approach, which is learning from what we've done in the past. As has been already said, every little step is important, and we feel like we're not doing enough, but we need to already get an idea of what is being done, what is happening internally, and then assess that in order to develop a real strategy and go much further. And we're very happy to share anything and will take part of any roundtables or conferences on these questions, because I think these are really very important areas, and it's really encouraging to share with all of you. If I could just jump in here and add something, because I can see that we have a student from the Louvre School here. I think it's also important, which we haven't managed to really cover this, but the question of applied research in the areas of sustainable development and eco-design. And I'd like to invite you to look into the work that Quentin is doing. He's working in particular for the Picasso Museum. He's working on an analysis grid for eco-design of their projects. He's working with questionnaires, and he may well be in touch with you. I've got a number of other students here as well who are working on materials that need to be tested, clean materials, materials that don't come out of the oil producing or materials using oil. We're moving forward with my colleague Nathalie Ladantec and Sandrine Lecomte. We're working on using new materials. This is something, 90% of artworks use plastic materials, and we need to move forward in these areas and looking in applied research for looking for new materials. I think this is very useful. Let's support our young researchers on these questions. I think that really is something that's very important. So it's already after 2:30. There are a lot more questions to discuss. That shows just to what extent this subject is really very important. I wanted to just thank all of our speakers again today for everything they've said. It's been really useful. I think these exchanges are going to lead to further discussions. Caitlyn has left her contact details. Perhaps other speakers might wish to do the same in order to go further with these discussions, so we don't have to just stop it here. I wanted to also say, in terms of scientific and cultural projects in French museums, a lot of our colleagues are including sustainable development in their thinking with their teams, also with local citizens when they're doing participatory work. I think this is something we're looking to there's a real desire to move forward, especially with the younger generation coming into our profession. I wanted to talk to you about the next debate, which will be held on the Tuesday, the 20th of April. It's the third Tuesday of the month at the same time, 1 o'clock French time. And this time we'll be talking about professional networks and whether they are instruments of solidarity. We will have one of our colleagues from abroad who'll be leading it. Because we really think this international leadership, the international dimension of this network is really very important. So thank you very much. So I'll just pass over to Juliette Raoul-Duval for the final word. President, this isn't really the last word because you've said so many things, but just to greet you all, thank you for being so many, so numerous today. I think there's been 235 of us today. I know that a lot of people then listen to the replays. We also have interpretation, of course. So this debate doesn't end here. It's going to be listened to again. I think that your loyalty to these sessions, these brief sessions of just 1.5 hours where we just hear from a few people to have a bit of debate, and then there's a discussion. There's a lot going on in the chat. This is a really good medium which allows everyone to participate. Not everyone can speak, but everybody can connect in with the chat, and everyone can read. We keep what's been written. We make a note of it, and all of it's going to be listened to again and reused. I think we've heard a lot of things today. We've understood that there are perhaps working groups that we need to develop within Icom France. We need to perhaps work on this urgently in the near future, because these are very important issues. Once again, thank you to our colleagues from a number of countries who've connected in today. I think a great deal of a good number of you came from outside France today. So thank you very much. Thank you to our Finnish and Greek friends, Israeli friends. Thank you to Estelle for her moderating of the event. Have a really good day, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 20th of April.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir, bientôt.